betrayed for marrying a poor man until he returned as a millionaire and silenced everyone. Sarah sat in her still and sterile nursing station, mere hours into another grueling 12-hour shift. She watched as the clock ticked painfully slow, each second echoing the swirling thoughts in her mind. The weight of her phone's constant updates felt insurmountable today, even as her parents' texts strained for attention in the background. They never failed to remind her of their expectations wrapped in success, wealth, and compatibility with a proper man. "Why can't you find someone like Tom from the Harringtons?" her mother had asked, her voice tight through the phone. "He's a lawyer, Sarah. You deserve better than Jake." The sting of it clawed at Sarah's heart. Jake was everything funny, genuine, a dreamer with real grit. What did her parents know of the love they shared? The small moments of joy sculpted through late-night talks and shared aspirations. In the months after their quiet marriage, Sarah devoted herself to her nursing career, pouring love into her patients. Jake ran a struggling mechanic shop, but somewhere deep within him wriggled the determination to create something greater. They were a paradox, a couple whose dedication bled into each moment, yet felt like shadows of doubt trailing them wherever they went. The disapproval of her family gnawed at Sarah's subconscious. Every success in their personal lives seemed counterbalanced by her mother's discontent. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. But Sarah felt everything tighten within her as night swept into silence. Each patient who walked through her door felt like a reminder of her own inadequacies. Did her choice to marry Jake seal her fate? Would her family ever forgive her for loving someone so utterly devoted yet seemingly shackled by poverty? Nights melted into mutual exhaustion as gear shifts of work stole their moments of shared joy. Then the day came, heavy with anticipation, when Jake returned from his workshop with the nearest semblance of hope, his newest invention. It was an innovation that had the potential to change the automotive world. Yet in the same breath echoed Sarah's insecurity, like remnants of a haunting past. Could they justify their struggles through his success? How would her parents react to a man they deemed unfit now painted in light? As she stood beside him at the gala, anxiety twisted into her gut. Could Jake's triumph wash over the families who once shunned him? The extravagant ballroom, filled with whispers and wealth, illustrated everything her parents valued and everything they considered her downfall. And then Jake turned, their eyes igniting an electricity heavy with unspoken worries. Would he shatter the illusions of her family, or would she lose everything she fought to build? Uncertainty clawed at her heart. Tonight, their future hung delicately in the balance, and Sarah felt the tremors of fate beneath her feet. The lights of the gala twinkled like distant stars, reflecting the swelling hope and dread in Sarah's heart. As Jake spoke with the attendees, his charisma ignited an energy in the room that left her equally entranced and uneasy. She watched him weave through conversations confident, poised, a stark contrast to the doubting part of her that feared this moment's potential repercussions. With every smile aimed his way, images of herself in her nursing scrubs rekindled a haunting self-doubt. She leaned against the cold wall, hearing snippets of laughter curling around her like an unwelcome fog. These were the people she had longed to impress. Yet now she felt herself retreating, invisible in the swell of sophistication surrounding her. She wasn't just a nurse tonight. She was the woman married to a nobody, as her mother had cruelly put it. The title weighed more heavily than ever, threatening to obscure everything she knew was beautiful about her life with Jake. Then came the moment a small group gathered around Jake, eyes wide with curiosity. She felt her pulse quicken. This was their chance. But lurking within her was a gnawing fear of unworthiness. Could she really stand alongside him as an equal tonight? Taking a deep breath, she wove through the crowd until she reached Jake's side. He turned and took her hand, a silent acknowledgement of their bond that momentarily lightened her spirit. But the moment dissolved into an uncomfortable silence as the group took notice of her. She could almost hear the judgmental whispers disguised as polite conversation. "This is Sarah, my wife," Jake declared, a sparkle in his eye. The way he said it, as if proud, momentarily placated her. Yet before she could bask in that warmth, a voice emerged from the throng, cool and questioning. "Ah, the nurse. I've heard so much about you," a well-dressed woman chimed, her tone dripping with condescension. "It must be quite a lifestyle, nursing while your husband clubs with the elite." Sarah's smile faltered, and she could feel the weight of every unspoken doubt coiling around her. She forced herself to maintain a steady posture, but the chatter of privilege washed over her like ice water. Wouldn't they be surprised by the strength within her? The way she had fought to understand both her role and aspirations? "We make it work, actually," Sarah replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Being a nurse is more than just a job. It's a calling." The same woman smirked, disbelief etched on her features. How quaint. Confusion swirled within Sarah. Had she just suggested that her life mattered in the company of this aristocracy? Instead of retreating, her mind sparked with a newfound determination. Wasn't it time to confront the stigma she felt, the inadequacy ingrained in her identity? An overwhelming yearning to reclaim her narrative surged through her. With a newfound resolve, Sarah took a small step forward, glancing at Jake, whose eyes mirrored her determination. "What do you do?" she asked the woman, feigning interest but bolstered by a flicker of strength. "Investment banking," she replied proudly. "Oh, I always wondered, does it take a lot of academic practice to drown empathy with wealth?" The words slipped from Sarah with unanticipated ferocity. The woman's smile faltered, surprise painting her features. The silence that followed echoed with potential. Sarah realized something vital. She possessed the power to redefine her worth. She simply needed to be courageous enough to sustain it. As Jake caught her gaze, admiration glimmering in his eyes, she understood that time had come to face the fears that shaped her narrative. But confronting an entire social sphere would take a depth of strength she hadn't yet discovered. With her heart hammering, she felt the crowd shift. Something within her flickered, ready to rise. What came next would matter not just for her but for the life she shared with Jake. Would they survive the scrutiny together, or would the world of wealth crush their dreams? The moment of truth loomed on the horizon, and Sarah knew the battle for. Her identity had just begun. What would she discover about herself in the face of such adversity? The moment lingered, taut with uncertainty and anticipation. As Sarah stood clutching Jake's hand, a lifeline in the swirling ocean of elite judgments. Her heart raced. A surge of defiance coursed through her veins, igniting a fervent desire to reframe her existence in this space. She realized this was not merely about proving her worth to the guests surrounding them, but about liberating herself from the confines of their contempt. As the laughter and chatter swirled around them, she felt a pull, a beckoning toward full self-expression, and the edges of her self-doubt began to fray. This was not just a battle of opinions. It was about claiming her stance within a life she had built with intention and care. She glanced at Jake, his eyes filled with admiration and something distinctly more encouragement. "Tell me, what drives your passion for investment banking?" Sarah addressed the woman again, her voice like a steel wire, underlined with urgency. She felt a transformation happening within her, an awakening of long-dormant convictions. She'd always believed that true fulfillment sprang not from riches, but from the bonds created and lives touched. The woman blinked, momentarily disarmed. "It's a demanding field, full of challenges," the woman replied, regaining some composure. "But I thrive on the intensity. Returns aren't just profits. They're a ladder to success." "Interesting. I suppose at some point those ladders get too high to see the ground you came from?" Sarah countered, feeling emboldened by the rising tide of her own narrative. "I help save lives daily, providing care to those who truly need it. That's where my success lies." The tension crackled like static electricity. Hushed whispers painted invisible lines of division between the two. In an environment so focused on status and wealth, she recognized the subtle power of connection. People gravitated toward vulnerability, and she had a choice: hold her ground or retreat into the shadows of convention. Speaking up felt almost alien, yet nothing could extinguish the gentle strength growing within her. Each word was a testament to her commitment to herself and to the lives she touched after long hours at the hospital. The group seemed to reevaluate her position in their elite bubble, and for the first time she glimpsed a potential shift in the air, a ripple of respect, perhaps. As the evening continued and conversations ebbed and flowed, Sarah found more moments to engage, to rebut, to enlighten. The naivete of her earlier hesitations paled in comparison to this newfound ability to adapt, connect, and shape her external reality unfiltered, unapologetic. Each interaction chipped away at the self-doubt that had latched onto her identity. Yet, amidst this burgeoning confidence, a nagging thought intruded. Would this newfound voice sustain her amid the test of wills that lurked behind the polished smiles and flashy gowns? She could outsmart a superficial disagreement, but what about deeper prejudices rooted in years of tradition? Would their dismissive laughter morph into something more pernicious? As she navigated through another conversation with a charming couple intent on boasting their latest charitable endeavors, one statement trapped her attention. "It must be hard for you to balance your ideals with all this." The tension around her climaxed. Would she allow such an insipid remark to undermine her journey? The night had unfolded before her. Every moment had painted a clearer picture of who she could become. Sarah could no longer accept any snippet of doubt as an invitation for her voice to quiet itself. With a renewed sense of clarity, she prepared to recenter her energy toward Jake, who watched her with pride growing in his gaze. Yet as she moved through the crowd, she spotted the woman she'd spoken with before, whispering again, eyeing her like a hawk. "Time to really find out who you are, Sarah," she thought. The room ignited with voices and laughter, but in her chest, there was an exhilaration balancing on a tightrope of fear and courage. Would she find the limits of her resilience? Would she continue to redefine her narrative? Or would this experiment encourage resonate poorly against the stakeholders of her perceived inadequacy? With every step back to Jake, the question lingered, waiting for a reply only time could determine. What awaited her on the other side of this confrontation? A din of laughter enveloped Sarah as she approached Jake, her heart still throbbing with the remnants of her confrontation. Despite the escalating tensions, she felt invigorated, almost alive with the thrill of carving out her place among the polished elite. Yet shadows of doubt threatened to creep back in, whispering that it was all an illusion, a temporary spark against an unforgiving backdrop. "Everything okay?" Jake asked, concern etched across his face as she reached him. "Better than okay," she replied, forcing a smile that felt genuine. The warmth of his hand served as a reminder of the sanctuary she'd built outside this world. Stepping away from the harsh light of judgment, she wondered if she could sustain this newfound assertiveness. "I want to continue challenging this perception," she thought, her mind racing. "What's the worst they can do? Think less of me?" The thought suddenly felt liberating. They already did. The time to navigate their scorn had passed. Now was the moment to embrace who she had become. "Hey Jake, let us talk," she said abruptly, pulling him to a quieter corner of the room where the music faded into the background hum of chatter. Within the halo of dimmed lights, she wanted to ground herself before returning to the fray. "I realized something tonight." "What's that?" "That I can't wait for validation from people who don't understand my worth." Jake nodded, but his eyes trained on the crowd, drawn to the woman who had rattled Sarah's cage moments earlier. "She seems to be watching." "Good," Sarah snapped, feeling a rush of defiance as anger flared. "Let her. I'm not here to earn her approval. I'm here to own my narrative." The strength of her voice startled him slightly. His face cracked into a grin, promoting a sense of solidarity. "That's the spirit. So what's next?" "What's next is I'm going to confront that woman with a newfound approach. I refuse to be a mere topic of conversation," she declared. "I want her to understand that I'm not to be underestimated." Jake studied her, and the moment hung heavy between them. "You know she might retaliate." "Let her," Sarah said, grounding herself deeper in conviction. This battle is about self-respect. That's my charge. I chose nursing to create meaningful impact, not to play the role of who I was expected to be. As the revelation settled within her, a powerful sense of clarity unfurled. She had walked through self-doubt and shame. Now those veils were ripped away. No longer would she participate in the polite charade of shoulders squared but hearts vacant. This was a matter of pride, anchored in the life choices she'd made. Jake's eyes sparkled, the light of admiration turning into something resolute. You're amazing when you're like this. Let us make it even more amazing, Sarah said, her heart racing with anticipation. Let me take the lead from here. He stepped back slightly, allowing her the space she craved. She powered back toward the throng of people, the stubborn woman still standing, seemingly unperturbed, a mocking smile tinged with superiority. Sarah approached, fueled with purpose. You have questions about my ideals? She began, matching the other's intensity. Let us discuss them openly. The crowd slowed, and eyes flicked between the two women as an invisible current charged the air. Sarah felt the surge of every moment she had lived so far, a patient's gratitude, a colleague's respect. These were her credits, her reality, and now she would advocate for that existence. But deep within, uncertainty flickered anew. Against the frivolity of wealth and status, was she truly ready to defend what mattered most? As their eyes locked, she could feel the stakes rising, an unspoken challenge sparking alive. She beckoned for honesty, for conviction, daring herself to step further into the depths of this confrontation. What awaited her in the unraveling of this tension? Sarah felt her breath stall momentarily. The moment had arrived to unearth more than just words. It was time to discover what she truly stood for, both in this world and beyond it. Sarah felt the crowd's full attention on her as she stood before the formidable woman. Fear gripped her, but she clutched the remnants of her courage. Seeking validation had been a weakness of hers, but standing here now would reveal a new strength, a demand for respect that echoed louder than any petty gossip. Let us talk about the expectations you carry, she said, raising her voice slightly, the tremor replaced by an assertive edge. I'm interested in the opinions I'm supposedly living up to. The other woman, tall and decked in designer attire, crossed her arms as if to bracket Sarah within a cage of her own making. Oh, is that what we're doing? Her tone dripped with condescension. How charming. Let us play pretend. Pretend is right, Sarah responded, allowing the defiance to spill into her words. I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not. You may think your status gives you authority over me, but the truth is you know nothing of my journey. At that moment, the shift within Sarah crystallized. She wasn't just opposing perceptions from this woman or the crowd. She was confronting herself, her past hesitations, the insecurities that had kept her silent. Standing before the polished elite, she realized her true worth was not defined by their perceptions but by the impact she made on her patients and those she cared for. Status doesn't equate to competence. I've worked tirelessly as a nurse, she continued, her voice steady. I know what empathy and expertise look like, and my patients recognize that. The corners of the woman's mouth twitched, as if Sarah's conviction caught her with an unexpected sting. The room buzzed. Whispers exchanged as onlookers absorbed this confrontation. For the first time, Sarah felt breadcrumbs of fear dissipate, replaced by a burgeoning authority she never recognized within herself. This was a pivotal moment where she began to reforge her identity, one steeped in passion and purpose. The tension charge bounced around the room, a shared breath waiting for a resolution. You think your little words can terrify me, lowly nurse? The other woman's retort was laced with venom, yet Sarah sensed the crack in her facade. You're just one voice among many, but the audacity of challenge sharpens clarity. That's where you're wrong, Sarah said, leaning slightly closer. I'm not just one voice. I represent the countless nurses and caregivers fighting in silence for respect. In that instant, she tapped into a strength nurtured through years of dedication and endurance. It was as if every trial she faced in her profession came crashing into this moment. As the crowd continued to absorb her boldness, She visualized each patient she had served, those who had taught her tenacity and resilience. Would they be proud of her now? They would recognize strength in authenticity as she found her own voice, raw and unyielding. But even in this surge of empowerment, the undercurrent of concern prickled at her conscience. What ramifications awaited her bold stance? The woman was now watching intently, hostility flickering beneath her polished exterior. Would her defiance trickle down into personal attacks, further entrenching her in this battle? Sarah straightened her spine, inhaling deeply to march forward. Hear us the truth. It's time we elevate the conversation about who deserves to be in these rooms, people like me who change lives. I won't let your derision define me. I'm here to uplift voices like mine. As the weight of her declaration sank in, Sarah could feel the dynamic of the room shift. Each heartbeat resonated with accountability, her declaration entwining with burgeoning respect. But as she looked back at her opponent, a lingering dread seeped through her confidence. What kind of retaliation could she expect from someone wielding such social power? The moment of truth loomed nearer, a pivotal path branching before her. Was she prepared to face the consequences of her liberation? And more importantly, would this transformation mark the beginning of a new chapter for her both personally and professionally? As Sarah clenched her jaw, she felt the intensity sharpen. A measure of resolve emanated from her. It was time to discover how deep her roots of identity truly ran. The room buzzed, engaging all she had stirred up. But beneath it all, she felt an equally strong pull toward the uncertainties ahead. As the murmur of the crowd settled into an uneasy silence, Sarah confronted the immediate aftermath of her challenge. She could feel the weight of their gazes, some curious, others judgmental, hungry for entertainment, eager for conflict. The awkward tension wrapped around her like a heavy cloak, mingling with the adrenaline still surging through her veins. Had she truly ignited a fire, or simply thrown herself into the lion's den? A mix of exhilaration and anxiety enveloped her as she felt the stakes rise. Every breath tasted electric, spurring her intrinsic drive for validation toward a clash with the reality she had known for so long. She wanted to dismiss the moment, return to the comfort of her routine, but now she was irrevocably altered, standing at a threshold of the unknown. Turning to examine the woman before her, Sarah noticed the subtle shift in her expression. The facade of superiority was cracking, revealing an unexpected vulnerability beneath layers of entitled disdain. Power dynamics were in flux. Sarah was no longer just the lowly nurse. She had stepped into the ring as an equal, armed with her truth. You misunderstand the stakes? The other woman spat, the glimmer of a challenge igniting in her eyes. While you crave applause, I have influence that can erase your every word. Sarah recognized the threat pulsing in her adversary's tone. But instead of quaking, a spark of determination flared within her. This was not just about her. The fight transcended their personal battle. It captured the essence of what she had long learned and fought for, a profession that demanded respect, acknowledgement, and appreciation. You think power is derived from influence alone? Sarah replied, her tone unwavering. It's built on genuine connection and the lives we touch. My worth isn't determined by your shallow acknowledgement. In that moment, she realized the depth of her conviction. This confrontation mirrored the countless hours she had spent with patients whose lives depended on the care she provided, not the reputation she carried. Each moment in that sterile hospital room had fused her resilience into armor she didn't even know she possessed. Yet, as she stood there, adrenaline coursing through her, shadows of doubt crept at the edges of her mind. Vulnerabilities, the friends who warned her against conflict, the colleagues who laughed off her ambitions, and her own internalized fears began to whisper. What if this public declaration would cost her her job? What if she faced isolation from those who mattered most? The woman's retort fired back, launching forward like a missile aimed at Sarah's newfound resolve. A nurse enthralled by delusion. Your perspective is quaint, but this is a game of power. In that instant, confusion and anger stirred inside Sarah. She had no interest in playing games. She wanted to lay a foundation for change, bridging gaps between privilege and humility. The battle was no longer about winning or losing. It was about planting seeds of respect that could flourish long after this moment. "Here is what I want," Sarah declared, her voice rising above the noise. "I want to redefine this conversation, create a space where nurses are valued not as lesser beings but as essential contributors. You see me as insignificant, but that's where you're mistaken." The audience traded glances, stunned by her unyielding stance, murmurs rising again like restless waves. Perhaps she held the potential to reshape perceptions. Perhaps she could procure the beginnings of a new narrative. But as doubt wrestled with excitement inside her, she grappled with one undeniable truth. This confrontation could shatter her, or it could make her. But the repercussions were not just personal. What awaited her in the aftermath? Would she remain steadfast? Or would the tide of backlash drown her efforts in frustration and isolation? The crowd held its breath as Sarah took a step back, her heart racing. She could feel the moment contract around her, the stakes growing heavier. One assertion had transformed into many, and with each word, she was reshaping the discourse. As the other woman's eyes narrowed, the room pulsed with anticipation. Would retaliation come in a singular robust wave or a gradual spiral of social exile? With her identity forged in passion, Sarah took a deep breath, aware that she had crossed onto enemy territory but resolute in her mission. And as she prepared to navigate the impending storm, she understood this was only the beginning. What strategies could she employ to protect and assert her place within this newly formed battlefield? The question loomed large as looming uncertainty whispered promises of challenge, igniting her willingness to confront the unknown. The moment hung suspended, an electric silence enveloping the room, charged with possibilities and consequences. As the crowd's anticipation crackled in the air, Sarah suppressed a wave of anxiety. What had she just unleashed? Resolute, she straightened her back, forcing herself to maintain a presence grounded in strength. She had taken this stand to advocate not just for herself but for her colleagues, the very foundation of the nursing profession. Casting a sidelong glance at her opponent, Sarah's thoughts spiraled. This was more than an individual feud. It symbolized a greater chasm, the divide between those who wielded influence without understanding the intricacies of the work and those who lived it daily. Every story of a patient saved, each shared moment of vulnerability in the hospital corridors challenged the status quo. Yet, how to turn this confrontation into a catalyst for change? Spurred by an instinctual understanding of the stakes, Sarah took a step forward, seizing control of the narrative. You see, having a voice means more than wielding influence. It's about compassion. It's about the connections we foster in moments of crisis. Her voice rang clear, each word carefully chosen to dismantle the facade of superiority her adversary clung to. In this high-pressure arena, Sarah realized her footing depended not solely on the words she crafted, but also on the authenticity of her intentions. Each interaction with her patients, often heart-wrenching, sometimes beautiful, had underscored a profound truth. Their stories mattered. She had a responsibility to echo their voices in this moment, amplifying the essential role of nurses whose daily sacrifices went unnoticed in favor of polished rhetoric and ostentatious titles. An uneasy shift rippled through the crowd, and Sarah pressed on. "We are educators, advocates, and healers. Our worth isn't contingent upon perception but upon the reality of our contributions. In an industry often overlooked, our commitment should command respect, not disdain." The crowd's initial restlessness began to transform into interest, a flickering curiosity igniting hope where doubt had lingered. But with each point Sarah articulated, a tight knot of fear coalesced in her stomach. She had appropriated influence through her own voice, yet the shadow of potential backlash loomed overhead. Rumors had already started to swirl about the challenge she had issued. How would the powers that be respond? Conversations in break rooms could shift from supportive to scornful in the time it took a coffee cup to shatter on the floor. Then she remembered her colleagues, their faces, their stories. She pictured them standing with her, bolstered by shared experiences that transcended individual ambitions. Sarah needed a plan, a strategy that would shield her from isolation and turn this confrontation into a broader movement for nursing recognition beyond her singular challenge. Her pulse quickened as ideas began to coalesce. Perhaps if she gathered her peers, a unified front could emerge. A coalition of voices, articulating their grievances together, could irrefutably shift perceptions. But how to rally them? How to inspire them to venture out of the safer shadows, where complacency reigned? With clarity transforming fear into a purpose-driven resolve, Sarah's heart raced. She had not only taken the initial step today, she had unwittingly set the stage for a potential uprising in the name of her profession. If she could channel this moment into a wider dialogue about respect and acknowledgement, she might just win more than a personal battle. She could ignite a movement. As the other woman regarded her with a blend of confusion and resentment, Sarah felt the burgeoning thrill of possibility. This was just the beginning. She needed to execute her plan without losing momentum. The audience was captivated. She had their attention. But time was of the essence, and she had no way of knowing just how quickly the tides could turn against her. Would the resistance coalesce into a supportive network, or would doubts fester, disintegrating her hopes for a more equitable environment? With every glimmering prospect for change came the awareness of potential pitfalls, and Sarah was determined to navigate them with strategy and precision. With dawning realization, she understood the challenge ahead was not merely her own, it was a collective struggle waiting for leadership. The flicker of resolve flared brighter within her as she took another deep breath. What alliances could she forge? How could she inspire action that would resonate beyond the spectacle of the moment? Amid the turmoil, one pressing question loomed heavy on her mind. Was she ready to lead this charge, to shoulder the consequences of becoming a voice for so many? She had thrown herself into the fray, but in what direction would she steer this tide of tension? The answers waited in the wings, but for now, each heartbeat pulsed with an urgency that demanded action. Amid the tension that crackled like static in the air, Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. The question of leadership loomed larger than any external foe. How could she turn her moment of bravery into a sustainable force that empowered her peers? Each face in the crowd bore the weight of expectation. They were looking to her to lead, but beneath that expectation simmered uncertainty. There was a chasm of fear and hesitation to bridge, both in herself and among her colleagues. As the final echoes of her speech faded, the atmosphere shifted. It was no longer just her words echoing, but rather a call for unity that waited on the edge of their collective consciousness. The potency of her message had created a charged space for conversation, a clearing where thoughts could roam free from doubt. This was the fulcrum upon which she could pivot. "I need to create a forum," she whispered under her breath, her mind racing with possibilities. A series of informal meetings, perhaps a place for nurses to share their experiences openly. If she could demonstrate that their stories shared weight and merit, it could transform her singular appeal into a rallying cry. Emotions mixed with strategy intensified her thoughts. The initial fear of backlash began to dissipate, replaced by the urgency of a burgeoning plan. But would the nurses take the leap? Sarah envisioned the faces of her colleagues, some timid, others skeptical. How many had witnessed injustice within the system but chose silence for fear of repercussions? Between each heartbeat pulsed the reality that many had grown accustomed to walking paths carved by compliance rather than courage. Determined to overcome this inertia, Sarah pulled out her phone, her fingers flying over the keyboard. She crafted a simple yet direct message, inviting her fellow nurses to gather. "I'm organizing a meeting to discuss our roles and the changes we can advocate for. If we want to change the narrative, we must start together." The thrill of agency surged within her as she hit send, releasing her hopes into the digital ether. Yet a flicker of doubt lingered. What if no one responded? Tension slipped into her stomach once again. She crawled through the fragile anticipation of waiting, stealing glances at the screen, even when it felt reckless. The hours dragged on as co-workers took their breaks, exchanging glances but no words. Would they see her as a beacon or merely a reckless wanderer? When the first notification popped up, 5 RSVPs, Sarah felt the weight in her chest begin to lift, replaced by an ember of hope. But with a growing network also came the dilemma of leadership. Standing at the forefront would attract scrutiny. Every decision weighed could either build or break their aspirations. Contemplating the challenges ahead, Sarah fought to fortify her resolve. Fear was an adversary she needed to acknowledge but not allow to dictate her actions. It was vital to stay focused on why she had taken this leap and understand that while the stakes felt singular, she now bore the burden of collective hope. In her anticipation, she began to replay the faces of patients she had cared for and the empowerment that stemmed from their trust. There was leverage in those memories. Perhaps she could start there, using patient stories to instill courage among her colleagues, to show them that advocacy was not merely a gamble, but a duty born from compassion. Days passed and she rallied a core group of nurses. They began gathering, sharing stories that wove a tapestry of systemic failures and personal triumphs. Together, they began to draft a proposal that would not simply be an assertion but a testament to their collective strength, a summary of their experiences, encapsulating the heart of their profession. But amid the building momentum, warnings began to surface in hushed tones. A whisper of resistance from higher-ups began infiltrating their discussions, igniting a lightning bolt of fear. The very forces she sought to challenge were unearthing and testing their resolve. Would they stand firm, or would the specter of intimidation fracture this burgeoning coalition? The weight of the world settled on her shoulders as a new reality dawned. This could crescendo into either a powerful uprising or a slow extinguishing of hope. The stakes had escalated. Would her vision hold in the face of adversity, or might she be setting herself and her peers up for a fall? The urgency to act surged through her veins once again, yet as she stood on the precipice of leadership, a daunting question bore into her thoughts. Was this truly the moment she was meant to carry, or would the very platform she sought to build become the ground of her dismantling? With every heartbeat, the need for clarity grew. The challenge of turning courage into action skittered through her mind, leaving a profound sense of anticipation churning within her. The time to stand strong was closing in, but the turbulence ahead felt overwhelming. Her next move would either carve a new path or plunge them into uncertainty, a choice whether to strengthen or dissolve under pressure. She inhaled deep, absorbing the possibilities swirling around her. If she was meant to lead, it could not be just through the fear of consequences, but rather through the boldness of conviction. Would this be her defining moment, or would she falter at the cusp of true change? As she prepared for the meeting, the air thickened with the palpable weight of impending decisions, uncertainty swirling like a tempest within her spirit, daring her to rise or yield. The following week loomed heavy as Sarah readied herself for the meeting. An internal battle raged within her. With every reflection, the apprehensions multiplied, forging a tempest of questions about leadership that continued to swirl chaotically. She understood that each participant felt their stakes. Some only shared their stories in the safety of whispers, while others operated under the harsh shadows of resignation. Yet here she was, standing on the brink of undeniable change. The day arrived, and a sense of surreal anticipation filled the small conference room. Each chair became a vessel for hopes, fears, and the stories that ready to unfold. As her colleagues filtered in, Sarah's heart raced not from fear alone, but also excitement. This wasn't merely about her. It was about her peers taking a step into uncharted territory. With every introduction, she sensed the resilience and fragility that bred among the collective. "Thank you all for coming," Sarah began, her voice steady despite the butterflies. "I know we've each faced our unique challenges, but I believe sharing our experiences can empower us. Our stories deserve to be heard." The atmosphere shifted, enabling honesty to seep in. The first nurse to speak, a woman with tired eyes yet an unwavering spark, recounted a harrowing experience with understaffing during a crisis. The frustration poured forth, filling the room. Others followed suit, and gradually the air thickened with shared narratives of adversity and silent battles. Yet, in this tide of cathartic sharing, a familiar unease lingered. Sarah felt the watchful gaze of the administration, their presence a specter tapping at the edges of her burgeoning momentum. Would these stories of truth come back to haunt them? As the meeting unfolded, their discussions morphed into a powerful exchange of insights. Fears were laid bare, and for the first time they found common ground in understanding that their roles didn't merely encompass care, but advocacy. Each added perspective became a building block, reinforcing the resolve that they were here for themselves and each other. It was exhilarating, a palpable energy radiating from the group. Each shared experience served as an affirmation that they weren't isolated in their struggles. They were woven together in a tapestry of purpose. Yet, even amid this momentum, Sarah's thoughts spiraled toward the looming pressures of external scrutiny. The undertones of resistance from management rattled against her newfound vision, wrestling constantly for her attention. A moment of clarity seized her, igniting a flicker of determination within. I want us to draft a proposal, but not just a list of grievances. Let us frame it as a roadmap for change. What we can accomplish together should not only reflect our problems but also our potential solutions. Surprised murmurs swept through the group, eyes lighting up. They didn't merely want to state what was wrong. They wanted a voice, a say in their future. However, this message brought an unsettling truth. Confronting authority required stepping into a spotlight that could easily turn into a crossfire. Would her peers still rally when the stakes grew sharper? She acknowledged that the road ahead was not merely about courage in the face of adversity, but also navigating betrayal and securing trust. With the other nurses enthusiastically contributing ideas, Sarah felt her sense of agency solidifying. Each suggestion transformed into a tool of empowerment, reinforcing her belief that change required both visibility and vulnerability. But every ounce of her intuition urged caution. The forces opposing them were gathering strength. After the session, Sarah sought solitude, pacing around her modest office, grappling with the task ahead. The fear of retaliation danced along the edges of her mind, yet she also recognized it for what it was, an instinctual reaction to the unknown. Lingering anxiety ebbed away as she recalled the patients whose voices echoed in her heart. It became clearer. They could not afford to remain voiceless themselves. With fresh resolve, Sarah sat down at her desk, mapping out the foundational pillars of their proposal. Each word became a step towards the transformation they yearned for. But just as clarity surged, an unsettling thought crept in. Would the awakening of their courage become their undoing? What if disapproval from higher-ups threatened their fight before it truly began? The juxtaposition of hope and fear crystallized into a choice she could no longer evade. The lines had been drawn. They were poised to embark on a quest for advocacy, but there was no guarantee of triumph. Was Sarah ready to face the consequences that might follow? As she penned the final note, the stakes rose. With a deep breath, she placed her hand on the page, a resolute decision forming. The road ahead would not be forged alone. An entire profession waited for the signal to march forward. The walls felt impenetrable and the odds daunting, but perhaps this was the crucible through which true conviction was forged. The time had come not just to confront the higher-ups but to prepare herself for the truth lurking in the shadows. What Sarah didn't know was that the very act of proposing change would reveal hidden truths about her own capacity for leadership, and the challenge of trust would be the real test. The meeting was set, an opportunity to unveil the proposal with her colleagues together as one. Their determination had built over the course of many shared experiences, and now they approached the moment of truth. Sarah stood in front of the gathered nurses, feeling the collective energy buzz with anticipation and resolve. Today isn't just about us sharing frustrations, she began, her voice steady, each word resonating with purpose. It's about taking action. This proposal isn't merely a plea. It's a call to recognize the integral role we play in patient care and advocate for systemic change. Among the gathered nurses, their faces fixed in focused expressions, they had emerged from tentative whispers into a unified group fueled by conviction. Nervous energy twisted in Sarah's stomach, but she bore her heart on the table now. The momentum of her past felt like the wind at her back. As she presented the carefully crafted proposal, detailing respecting department structures and improved working conditions, she saw nods of agreement ripple through the attendees. Each point she made echoed past conversations, moments that had kept them awake at night, despairing because of a system that often took their roles for granted. They were no longer whispers in shadowy corners but architects of a vision for equitable work environments. But her mind wavered. Unsettling reminders of potential backlash whispered in the corners of her conviction. What awaited them after the unveiling? Were they, as a coalition, prepared for resistance from those entrenched in power? With every glance around the room, Sarah felt deeper connections igniting. These weren't merely co-workers. They were allies sharing the same burden. Each person in the room had brought their unique strength to the proposal, and together they had the potential to speak louder than any single individual's voice. Let us sign our names at the bottom together. Let us show that we stand resolute in our commitment, Sarah urged, making eye contact with each nurse gathered in solidarity. As they passed the document around, multiple signatures scrawled beneath the title. She felt the walls of fear begin to melt away. They were emboldened by putting their names where they had previously only allowed their voices to exist. Yet, amid the triumph, an unexpected weight pressed into the air, seeping doubt into Sarah's heart. What kind of resistance would they face now? In the midst of their accomplishment lay the specter of potential fallout, a reality she could not ignore. Would the administration undervalue their intentions? Would the pushback harden further barriers instead of breaking through? With the proposal signed, they resolved to present it to the board of directors the following week. The collective anxiety was palpable, yet with that anxiousness came an undeniable sense of urgency. For days leading up to the meeting, Sarah's resolve was tested. The whispers of self-doubt occasionally crept back, but she fought back fiercely against them. Finally, the day arrived, and Sarah led the team into the conference room where faces of authority lined up against stark white walls, eyes scrutinizing. She stood, filled with the power of her colleagues beside her, gathering her breath. As she began to speak, she felt her determination tighten within her. We're here because for far too long, our voices have been overlooked while we have been committed to the care of countless patients, she stated, projecting her conviction across the room. What we do daily matters more than has been recognized. Today, we unveil our proposal not just as caregivers but as equal partners in the healthcare system. Every face around the table exhibited a mix of displeasure and intrigue. It was clear they were accustomed to a hierarchy that had, historically, marginalized the very people who formed its backbone: nurses. Let's ask ourselves, who truly holds the knowledge of care? Sarah continued, pushing through her mounting apprehension. It's those on the ground, day in and day out, battling the odds and delivering care. In witnessing the struggles of our patients, we have insight into what needs to change within our own environments. As her words took flight, she felt the collective energy of her fellow nurses surging like electric currents, feeding into her confidence. This was no longer just her battle. It was theirs. Each signature on that proposal, a testament to shared commitment. She could sense a shift in the room, a flicker of realization igniting the possibility of dialogue. Yet there remained resistance. An adversarial voice emerged from the board, skepticism lacing their tone. Your proposal, while ambitious, overlooks the complexities involved in systemic operations. Change cannot occur on a whim. The dismissive gaze met hers squarely, challenging her conviction. Change is never easy, Sarah countered, her clarity unwavering. But to ignore our insights is to stifle real progress. We do not seek to provoke. We seek acknowledgement, collaboration, and the respect our profession demands. For the first time, she saw a slight shift. As she navigated questions from the board, she drew strength from the unwavering camaraderie surrounding her. She reminded herself of the collective experiences those weary patients who cried out for advocacy beyond the confines of management. Every single moment solidified the foundations they had fought to build, and her clarity resonated in the air. As the meeting wound down, Sarah could feel the palpable tension lingering, but she had made strides in almost cosmically impossible conditions. The work lay ahead, roiling compounding challenges. Yet a small victory had been claimed, one rooted firmly in their right to exist, advocate, and stand as equals in the pursuit of change. Suddenly, a board member shifted their position, speaking softly yet intently. We must acknowledge what you've brought forth. It may not seem golden, but the voices you represent have merit. The questions of respect and progression cannot go ignored. A monumental shift occurred. What started as warped skepticism had just opened the dialogue toward possibility. They weren't simply heard. They demonstrated unity, taking the first step toward tangible recognition. As the meeting adjourned, Sarah stepped outside with her colleagues, and they exchanged glances of disbelief mingled with pure victory. They had faced the higher-ups and, against the odds, planted a seed for change, igniting hope in the possibility of their roles being recalibrated on a fundamental level. With every conversation in the days that followed, Sarah grew into her leadership, elevating her own understanding of powerful narratives. She became an advocate not just for herself but for the entire nursing community, facilitating workshops and open dialogues that surged with goodwill and determination. As months passed and they began to see organizational changes, more resources, better staffing, and respected voices within meetings, the sense of fulfillment washed over Sarah like a cleansing tide. She had conquered the doubt that had long lingered. She stood with a vibrant community, proving that change was achievable. The personal and professional journey transformed her understanding of resilience. Determination blossomed within her, learning that true leadership required vulnerability as much as strength. Each stride turned the pages of traditional narratives, reframing her experience into one of empowerment. Sarah realized her worth lay not only in professional recognition but in forging a legacy of advocacy. She had embraced her reality, transformed relationships, and confronted the myth of inadequacy, learning how to honor her role as both a nurse and a leader. In the end, she emerged with solid confidence, no longer just Jake's wife or a mere employee. Instead, she had become a source of inspiration within her field, proving that with courage came transformation, and her journey confirmed that one voice, rooted in authenticity, could inspire an entire community. The road they had taken felt daunting, yet it positively reshaped their profession and reaffirmed their identities. The path had proven challenging, but the outcome was worth every hardship endured. They would continue to rise, tell their stories, and advocate for those who had awkwardly penned their worth within increasingly unrecognizable narratives. As she ventured forth, Sarah understood the power of community, and in her heart, she had no intention of being anything less than the voice that made ripples into the future. Their stories mattered, their dedication counted, and together they would change the world they had chosen to inhabit with purpose rooted in the undeniable values of empathy, vigilance, and respect. And just like that, Sarah conquered not only the challenges that lay before her, but also the silent doubts that had nestled within her heart. She had forged a narrative that evoked profound change, and now, her story stood as testament to the infinite possibilities born from courage, and she invited everyone to join in this extraordinary journey of growth. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Seriously, it makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending below, because we want to hear what you think. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share.